welcome to Gripping Tales. Are you ready for today's video? It starts now.
Do security guards see things we're not supposed to know about? Are these things real or just fantasy? Tonight we find out the truth. Security guards work alone in empty buildings after everyone else has gone home. They patrol dark hallways, check locked rooms, and monitor surveillance feeds while the rest of the world sleeps. They're paid to protect property and maintain order. But they're not paid enough for what they actually experience. Let's now share 7 terrifying things security guards have witnessed on night shift. These aren't stories from horror movies. These are real accounts from professional security personnel, documented on Reddit, shared in forums, verified by coworkers, people who've seen things in the 3 a.m. hours that made them quit their jobs and never work nights again. From figures appearing on cameras that vanish in person, to sounds that shouldn't exist in empty buildings, to encounters that blur the line between the paranormal and the criminal. These 7 stories prove that security guards don't just guard buildings. They guard secrets. And sometimes, those secrets don't want to stay hidden. Clock in. It's going to be a long night at Pit Secrets. This story comes from a security guard who worked at a large office building in an unnamed city. The building had 20 floors, a ground lobby, and 2 basement levels used for storage and maintenance. The guard's job was simple: sit at the front desk, monitor the security cameras, and do periodic patrols. Late one night, around 2:30 a.m., he noticed something odd on the elevator camera feed. The elevator was moving, descending from the 4th floor. That wasn't unusual by itself. Sometimes the elevator would move if someone on another floor pressed a button. But when the guard checked the camera feeds for floors 1 through 20, he saw no one. The building was empty. The elevator reached the lobby. The doors opened. The camera showed the interior, completely empty. The doors closed. The elevator continued descending. Basement 1, doors go. Basement 2. The guard watched the screen, confused. Who had called the elevator to the basement? No one should be down there at this hour. 2 and 2. Then he saw something that made his blood run cold. On the elevator's interior camera, as the doors opened to basement 2, a group of people got out. He counted 5 figure silhouettes in the dim basement lighting, walking away from the elevator and disappearing into the darkness. But when he switched to the basement 2 hallway camera, he saw nothing. The hallway was empty. The guard called his supervisor, who told him to check it out. So he grabbed his flashlight and headed down. The basement was cold, quiet, and cluttered with old furniture and equipment. He searched every corner, every storage room, every possible hiding place. Nothing. No one was there. He returned to his desk and reviewed the footage again. On the elevator camera, the figures were clear. On the basement hallway camera, nothing. It was as if the people existed only inside the elevator, visible only to that one camera. The guard filed a report. Other guards who worked that building confirmed they'd seen similar things. Elevator doors opening and closing on empty floors, the elevator moving to the basement without being called, and occasionally shadows moving inside the elevator that weren't visible anywhere else. One theory was that the camera was malfunctioning, showing old recorded footage overlaid on the live feed. But the timestamps matched, and the figures appeared in real time as the elevator moved. Another theory, whispered among the guards, was darker. The building had been constructed in the 1970s. During construction, a worker had fallen down the elevator shaft and died. Some believed his spirit, and the spirits of others who died in the building over the decades, still used the elevator, traveling between floors unseen by the living. The guard who witnessed the basement incident quit 2 weeks later. He told coworkers he couldn't shake the feeling that those figures knew he was watching them, and that one day they'd be waiting for him when the elevator doors opened. At least that guard had cameras to show him what was happening. But what about the guards who patrol buildings with no surveillance? Just flashlights, empty rooms, and whatever's waiting in the dark. In the 1980s, a man worked security to pay for college. He was assigned to a closed hospital, 20 floors, completely abandoned, filled with old medical equipment and debris. His job was to walk every floor at the start and middle of his shift, which took about 2.5 hours. The building was like something from a horror movie. Most lights didn't work. Ceiling tiles hung down everywhere. The steam heat was still on, creating constant noise pipes, knocking, hissing, groanings. One night, the guard was on the 15th floor when he heard a loud crash down a side corridor. He froze, heart pounding, flashlight trembling in his hand. He forced himself to investigate. At the end of the hallway, he found 10 ceiling tiles scattered across the floor. A leaking pipe had caused them all to fall at once. Just a pipe, nothing paranormal. But the guard admitted later, for those few seconds before he found the tiles, he was convinced something else was in that hallway with him. The worst floor was the 18th, the surgical floor. It had all tiled operating rooms with observation windows around the top. All the equipment was still there. Operating tables, surgical lights, trays of instruments covered in dust. The guard described walking through those rooms alone at night, knowing people had died on those tables, knowing the observation windows above were dark and empty, but feeling like someone was watching from them anyway. He lasted 6 months. Then he quit. He told friends, "You can't pay me enough to spend another night in that place. Every shift, I felt like I was walking through a graveyard. Except the dead weren't buried. They were still there." Years later, the hospital was demolished. But former guards who worked there all reported similar experiences. Hearing footsteps on empty floors, seeing shadows move in peripheral vision, feeling cold spots in certain rooms, and most disturbing, occasionally hearing what sounded like medical equipment beeping or humming, even though nothing was plugged in. One guard claimed he saw a nurse walking down a hallway on the 12th floor. She was wearing an old-style uniform, white dress, white cap, and pushing a medication cart. He called out to her, but she didn't respond. She just kept walking until she turned a corner and vanished. When he rounded the corner, the hallway was empty. No doors. No rooms. Just a dead end. He reported it. His supervisor told him, "Yeah, others have seen her too. We call her the night nurse. Just let her do her rounds. She won't bother you." But the guard couldn't handle it. He transferred to a different site. Because knowing there was a ghost in the building was one thing. Seeing her was another. Closed hospitals are expected to be creepy. But what about places that should be safe? Places like churches, where people go to pray and find peace. A security guard worked third shift at an old Catholic school. The building was from the early 1900s, ornate architecture, stained glass windows, and religious statues throughout. One night, while patrolling the grounds, the guard saw something disturbing. The statue of the Virgin Mary behind the school was crying blood. Red liquid ran down the statue's face, illuminated by the spotlight. The guard approached carefully. It was paint. Someone had vandalized the statue to make it look like it was weeping blood. He reported it. Maintenance cleaned it up the next day. But the incident put the guard on edge. A few nights later, he was patrolling one of the classroom buildings when he heard laughter. Children's laughter. Coming from upstairs. He stopped, listening. It was definitely laughter. Multiple children, giggling and talking. Then he heard furniture moving. Desks being dragged across the floor. The guard walked upstairs. Every single light was off. Every door was locked. But the sounds continued. Laughter, furniture scraping, voices talking, all coming from behind the locked doors. He tried to open the doors. They were secured. He shone his flashlight through the windows. The classrooms were empty. Dark. No movement. But the sounds didn't stop, though. They moved from room to room, as if whatever was making the noise was aware of him and was playing with him, staying just out of sight. The guard ran out of the building and called his supervisor. He refused to enter that building again for the rest of his shift, though. The next night, a different guard was assigned to that building. He reported hearing the exact same thing. Children laughing, furniture moving, voices talking, all behind locked doors in empty classrooms. The school had a history. In the 1950s, a fire had broken out in that building. 3 children died. Their bodies were found in one of the second-floor classrooms, huddled together near a window, overcome by smoke. Some guards believed the children's spirits were still there, playing in the classrooms they'd attended decades ago, unaware they were dead. Others thought it was something darker. One guard claimed he heard a child's voice whisper, "Help us," through one of the locked doors. He quit the next day. The original guard transferred to a daytime shift. He told coworkers, I'm grateful for my 9 to 5 in a cubicle now. I'll never work nights again. Some places, you just know something's wrong. And that school? Something is very, very wrong. At least those guards could leave the buildings when their shifts ended. Oh. But what about guards who see things on surveillance cameras and have to decide, do I investigate or do I pretend I didn't see it? A security guard worked the midnight to 6 a.m. shift at a corporate headquarters in New York City. His job was to monitor surveillance cameras and do occasional sweeps of the building. One night, around 1 a.m., he noticed movement on one of the screens. Camera 4, third floor hallway. A shadow darted across the frame. The guard rewound the footage. There it was. A dark, vaguely human-shaped shadow moving from one end of the hallway to the other. Not walking. Gliding. His beast. He checked the adjacent cameras. Nothing. No one had entered or exited the hallways. The shadow appeared in one spot, moved across the frame, and disappeared. The guard called his partner, who was on a break. I need you to check the third floor. I saw something on camera. His partner went upstairs, radioed back. Nothing here. Hallway's empty. No. But as his partner stood in the third floor hallway, the guard watched the monitor. And he saw it again. The shadow appeared behind his partner, moving across the screen, passing within inches of him. It's right behind you, the guard shouted into the radio. His partner spun around. There's nothing here, man. You're seeing things. But the guard could see it on the monitor. Clear as day. A shadow, moving independently, unattached to any person or object. His partner returned to the security desk. They reviewed the footage together. The shadow was visible on camera, but his partner, who'd been standing right there, hadn't seen or felt anything. Over the next few weeks, the shadow appeared multiple times. Always on the third floor. Always the same hallway. Different cameras, different angles, but the same entity. The guard did some research. The building had been constructed in the 1980s. In 1995, an employee had died of a heart attack on the third floor. He'd been working late, alone, and wasn't discovered until the next morning. Was the shadow his spirit, still walking the hallway where he'd died? Or was it something the cameras could see that human eyes couldn't? Some presence that existed just outside normal perception, visible only through electronic surveillance? The guard never got an answer, but he learned to ignore camera 4. He'd glance at it occasionally, see the shadow moving, and just look away. Because some things, he decided, are better left unacknowledged. Shadows on cameras are unnerving, but they're contained. They can't hurt you through a screen. But what about encounters where you're face to face with something and you have no idea what it is? An overnight security guard worked at a megachurch, one of those massive facilities with multiple buildings, a sanctuary that seats thousands, and countless rooms and hallways. He'd been working there for months without incident. He'd walk the property, check doors, monitor alarms. It was peaceful, quiet, easy money. Then one night, everything changed. He was walking through the second floor of the sanctuary, an elevated walkway that overlooked the main seating area. He'd done this hundreds of times. But this night, as he walked through the dark, empty space, he began to feel terror. Not unease, not nervousness. Pure, overwhelming, primal terror. There was no reason for it. Nothing had changed. The room looked the same as always. But the guard felt like he was being hunted. Always. Like something was in that room with him, watching him, waiting for the right moment to strike. He ran. Didn't walk. Ran out of the sanctuary and didn't stop until he was outside in the parking lot, gasping for breath. He called his supervisor. I can't go back in there. Something's wrong. His supervisor told him to finish his shift from the main office. The guard did, but he refused to enter the sanctuary again without the lights on. He asked other guards if they'd experienced anything similar. Several said yes. That same second-floor walkway. That same sudden, inexplicable terror. One guard described it as feeling like you're not supposed to be there, like something is telling you to leave before it's too late. Another said, it's like being in a horror movie. You know something's about to happen, but you can't see it yet. The church had no known history of deaths or tragedies. But multiple guards, independent of each other, reported the same experience in the same location. Some believed it was a spiritual presence. A church is a place of worship, but it's also a place where people come with their darkest fears and deepest sins. Maybe all that emotional energy leaves an imprint. Maybe the sanctuary absorbed decades of fear, guilt, and pain, and on certain nights, it manifests as something tangible. The guard who first experienced the terror transferred to a different site. He told coworkers, "I'm not religious, but something is in that building, and it doesn't want us there." Feelings of dread are psychological, explainable, if disturbing. But what about physical encounters? What about seeing something that shouldn't exist? This story comes from a security guard who works emergency response at a mine site in Western Australia. Part of his job includes security patrols of remote offices and facilities. One night, he was driving back from a remote office he'd locked up. The road was dark, empty, nothing but desert and scrub for miles. Then he saw something cross the road ahead of him. At first, he thought it was a kangaroo. Kangaroos are common in the area, and he'd seen hundreds of them during his shifts. But as he got closer, he realized this wasn't a kangaroo. It was about 100 meters ahead, crossing the road in darkness. The guard was doing 90 kilometers per hour, so he slowed down but approached quickly. When his headlights illuminated the creature, he saw something that made his mind refuse to process what he was seeing. It was tall. Taller than a human. It moved on two legs, but the movement was wrong. Jerky, unnatural, like stop-motion animation. Its limbs were too long. Its proportions were off, below, and it turned its head to look at him. The guard hit the brakes. The creature stood there for a moment, staring at the vehicle, with the headlights washing over it. Then it continued across the road and disappeared into the scrub. The guard sat in his truck, shaking. He radioed the office. "Did anyone else see something out here tonight? Something not normal?" No response. He was the only person on patrol in that area. He drove back to the main office and filed a report. His supervisor listened, nodded, and said, "You're not the first. Others have reported seeing things out here at night. We don't talk about it much, but yeah, there's something in the desert." The guard did some research. Aboriginal Australians have stories about creatures in the outback, spirits and beings that exist outside normal reality. Some are protectors. Others are malevolent. Whatever the guard saw that night, he knows one thing: it wasn't a kangaroo. And it wasn't human. He still works at the mine, but he refuses to patrol that stretch of road alone after dark. Because he knows now, the desert isn't empty. Something lives out there. And it's watching. Remote locations are one thing, but the final story takes place in the most mundane setting imaginable: a parking garage. Because sometimes, the scariest encounters happen in places we think are safe. A security guard worked at an airport parking garage. His job was to patrol the decks, clean up trash, and make sure vehicles weren't abandoned. One night, while cleaning the top deck, he noticed something odd. About 100 ravens gathered on and around a pickup truck with a tarp over the bed. That was unusual. Ravens are scavengers, but they don't typically swarm vehicles. As he approached, he smelled it. Rot. Decay. Death. The ravens were taking turns diving under the tarp, emerging covered in something dark and wet, then flying off. The guard pulled back the tarp. Inside the truck bed were animal carcasses. Multiple animals. Badly decomposed. No heads. Just bodies rotting in the heat. The guard checked the parking records. The truck had been there since November. It was now April. Months of decomposition in a sealed truck bed. He called it in. Police arrived, investigated, and had the truck towed. The owner was eventually tracked down and fined for improper disposal of animal remains. But the guard couldn't shake the experience. The smell. The ravens. The sight of decomposed flesh being torn apart by birds. And the question, why would someone leave headless animal carcasses in a truck bed for months? What were they doing with those animals? And where were the heads? The guard started noticing other strange things in the parking garage. Cars that sat for weeks with windows cracked, flies swarming inside. Vehicles with bloodstains on the seats. Abandoned cars that smelled like chemicals. He realized parking garages are liminal spaces. People leave things there, intentionally or not, and those things rot, decay, and are forgotten. and security guards are the ones who find them. The guard still works at the airport, but he's more cautious now. He checks vehicles more carefully. He pays attention to smells, sounds, signs that something is wrong. Because he knows, not all the horror on night shift is paranormal. Sometimes, the scariest things are completely human. These are 7 terrifying things security guards see on night shift. From elevators carrying invisible passengers, to abandoned hospitals where the dead still walk, to Catholic schools filled with the laughter of children who died decades ago, to shadows visible only on cameras, to churches that radiate inexplicable terror, to creatures in the Australian outback that shouldn't exist, to parking garages hiding decomposition and decay. These stories prove that security guards don't just protect property. They witness things the rest of us never see. If you work security, you know. The 3 a.m. hours when the building is silent and you hear footsteps that have no source. The surveillance footage that shows things that shouldn't be there. The feeling of being watched in empty rooms. Security guards are the sentinels of the night. They stand between us and whatever exists in the darkness. And sometimes, that darkness pushes back. Stay safe out there. And if you're working night shift tonight, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is.
Thanks for watching. Every ending hides the beginning of another tale, and ours is already on its way. Stay tuned. You'll find the next chapter right here, and soon.